Hey everybody, it's Chris. I've been going over Heroes of Faerun, the new source book for Dungeons & Dragons, and I started out going over subclasses, and we're getting close to the end. We're on to Spellfire Sorcery, and there's one more after this. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through all the features. I am going to be assessing them. I'm going to be comparing them to other subclasses. I'll make some observations of comparisons to the playtest. And then give you a final evaluation at the end. But let's begin with the description of the subclass. It says, wield raw magic. Your innate power stems from the source of magic itself, the weave. And the weave is like a Forgotten Realms thing. This connection manifests as a rare ability known as Spellfire, and you surge with radiant bursts of this raw magic. Your talent with Spellfire allows you to heal allies, sear enemies, and absorb powerful spells. Wielders of Spellfire tend to have a penchant for wandering. Many travel between cosmopolitan settlements, such as those along the Sword Coast, and wield their magic in service of the common good. Others realize their own strange powers by roaming equally strange lands, from the magic-blasted wastes of the deserts of Honorok to the god-touched wilds of the old empires. Wherever they go in the realms, Spellfire sorcerers are courted by factions with interests in arcane arts, such as the Harpers, Cult of the Dragon, and Red Wizards. So, let's get going. We begin with Spellfire Burst, and on your screen, you'll see white text. That's what's in the book. Yellow text are my notes. And we're going to get 2 features at level 3 in this, and we're going to get some extra spells for the subclass. It says, when you spend at least 1 sorcery point as part of the magic action or a bonus action on your turn, you can unleash one of the following magical effects of your choice. You can only do so once per turn. I am going to just point out here that that means that this will happen most of the time that you spend sorcery points, but not necessarily every single time. Like, for example, this subclass is going to have special abilities involving Counterspell. If you cast Counterspell and you want to heighten it to give disadvantage on the saving throw to get a better chance of that effect working, it will not benefit from a Spellfire Burst because that is a reaction, not an action or a bonus action. But we're going to get 2 options when this does trigger, and they are Bolstering Flames and Radiant Fire. Bolstering Flames is temporary hit points. Radiant Fire is damage. The temporary hit points can be given to a creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself, and they total a d4 plus your charisma modifier. And the damage is a creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself, and they take a d4 fire or radiant damage, and you choose. This is very similar to the way it was in the playtest, except now Radiant Fire does a d4 without a saving throw, while in the playtest it did a d6 with a saving throw. This is a good change, in my opinion, as although the overall damage might not be much more. I mean, if we consider that most creatures fail their saving throws, or saving throws have probably failed more than half the time, and nobody's using a legendary resistance on this, a d6, once you put in the saving throws, might be a similar average damage to this, but this is now damage you can rely on, and it is going to be a lot less clunky to use because you're just removing a step that didn't need to be there. So I like that. That's good design. When you get this feature, you're not going to be using it very often. And that is unlike other sorcerer subclasses. Most of them with level 3 features have unlimited use, or they have passive features that you don't need to activate, or they have features that can be used more often than this one can. This one, unless you're burning spell slots to get extra sorcery points, we're talking about, at level 3 times per long rest, probably. Our uses are going to scale quickly, though, because we're going to get 1 more use per level, and then more yet at level 5 once we get Sorceress Restoration. What won't really scale are the effects, at least until level 14, because that will scale both of these. But until then, the only scaling that this is going to get at all is when we increase our charisma modifier, we'll get 1 additional point for Bolstering Flames, and we're probably at a +3 modifier when we get this, and so we'll eventually be to a +5 modifier. So that means up until level 13, we're only talking about 2 more temporary hit points, and Radiant Fire, when we're level 13, we're still doing a d4 damage with it. but they will both be used a lot more often at those higher levels. Now, because of the scaling, you're going to find that Bolstering Flames does not keep up with a lot of temporary hit point offering options in the game right now. There are so many ways to give out temporary hit points now. I wish they would stop. I wish they would stop. There's so many because they're redundant. They don't stack. So you end up with multiple characters who can give out temporary hit points, often several times. And when you have somebody like this who's not adding their level to the amount of temporary hit points, so it's not really scaling that much, it can become, redundant. You're the backup temporary hit point giver. And considering Radiant Fire isn't a whole lot of damage, that does hurt. But that's not to say this is a bad feature. This is not a bad feature. It's a decent feature. And we also get our extra spells, the Spellfire Spells. And we can see at level 3, we're going to get Cure Wounds, Guiding Bolt, Lesser Restoration, and Scorching Ray as free preparations. Then Aura Vitality and Dispel Magic at level 5, Fire Shield and Wall of Fire at level 7, Greater Restoration and Flame Strike at level 9. The standouts here are the healing spells. So we're talking Cure Wounds, Lesser Restoration, Aura Vitality, and Greater Restoration. These are not normally available to sorcerers, but in addition to that, sorcerers don't have any spells that do anything similar. So it allows you to fill a niche that you otherwise couldn't fill. Dispel Magic, Fire Shield, and Wall of Fire are nice additions, as they're spells you might have prepared anyways. And there is some filler here. For example, Guiding Bolt is probably weaker than Chromatic Orb, despite doing a similar thing. Overall, though, this is a good list. Now, Wild Magic has a very, very strong level 3 feature, so it's kind of hard to eclipse that. But when I compare this to the other sorcerer subclasses that give you spells at level 3, because Wild Magic doesn't do that, then I would say this is as good or better than those. I'd say it's pretty darn close to Draconic at level 3, though at higher levels, I think we end up with a better spell list here. But I do think it's probably stronger than both Clockwork and Aberrant at level 3, so it is above average, I'd say, when we're talking level 3. Let's move on to level 6, and we get Absorb Spells. It says you always have the Counterspell spell prepared. Additionally, whenever a target fails a saving throw against a counterspell you cast, you regain a d4 sorcery points. It is worth noting that the addition of Counterspell is on top of Spellfire Spells, meaning this subclass actually has more spells prepared than other sorcerers, including those with their own spell lists. If you cast Counterspell and it works, the d4 sorcery points almost compensates for the 3rd level spell you had to use to cast it. I mean, if you use Font of Magic, it won't be nearly enough to get that 3rd level slot back, but it definitely compensates you for the use. Of course, only if they fail their saving throw. The 2024 Monster Manual also added more spells to monsters. I had a patron of my channel. They left a comment yesterday, and so I want to mention this. They asked me to remind my viewers that creatures like dragons now use spells as part of their legendary actions. And that is relevant to this feature. Just remember that a lot of monsters that didn't used to use spells now do. And that is going to give us more opportunity to cast Counterspell. About 1/4 of printed monsters in the Monster Manual have spells, meaning there's a good chance you're going to get to use this feature at least once in an adventuring day. Now, it's not all about how many creatures are casting spells, though, or the opportunity to use this. It's about whether you want to use it, because the main limit here, I would say, is not necessarily the opportunity to use it, but how many 3rd level spell slots do you want to use for Counterspell? I mean, at level 6, you only have 3 3rd level spell slots. They're your highest level spells. So you might only want to use this once or twice, even if you have more opportunity, because you want to cast those other 3rd level spells. Once you're higher level, that is going to be less of a problem, because you don't really care if you're going to expend all your 3rd level spells on Counterspell, and you might even, depending on your level, you might even be willing to expend 4th level spell slots on Counterspell as well, even though it doesn't really make Counterspell better. But you may not need those 4th level spell slots for anything else. But that's the main limit here, is not unlike their 3rd level feature. It's not requiring any special resources to use because we might be casting Counterspell anyways. But we have limited uses here. We're going to be talking about limited spell slots in this case, and when we talk about level 3, it was limited sorcery points. Let's move on to level 14 and hone Spellfire. Your Spellfire Burst improves. You add your Sorcerer level to the temporary hit points gained from bolstering flames, and the damage of your Radiant Fire increases to a D8. So, just a reminder that the temporary hit points before was a D4 plus your Charisma modifier, and Radiant Fire was a D4 damage. So the scaling here for your bolstering flames is really dramatic. I mean, just think about it. The temporary hit points you would provide with that feature at level 13 would be about 8, which is not much at all for a 13th level temporary hit point feature. Not good at all. But now, at level 14, one level later, 22. That is good. That's almost triple. The Radiant Fire scaling here is much less dramatic. It does just a little bit less than double the damage that it would have done before. At this point, it's very reasonable to assume that your Spellfire Sorcerer will become the best provider of temporary hit points that your party has. But comparatively, if we're looking at other Sorcerer subclasses and what they get at level 14, is this as good as rolling twice on the Wild Magic Surge table and picking? Is this as good as Clockwork Cavalcade? I'm not sure it's that good. But I do think this is sitting nicely in the middle for Sorcerer features at this level, so I am not angry at it. It's not a bad feature at all. And then we get to level 18, and we get Crown of Spellfire. It says, when you use innate sorcery, you can alter it and infuse yourself with the essence of Spellfire, gaining the following benefits while this use of innate sorcery is active. Once you use this feature to alter innate sorcery, you cannot use it again until you finish a long rest. So 1 use per long rest, unless you spend 5 sorcery points, no action required to restore your use of it. Is it worth 5 sorcery points? Maybe. Maybe I got a bunch of sorcery points back by casting Counterspell. Then it might be worth the 5 sorcery points. But we get 3 things when we activate it. And these last as long as our innate sorcery is active, which is a minute. Burning Life Force. Once per turn, when you are hit by an attack roll, you can expend a number of hit point dice up to a maximum equal to your Charisma modifier, minimum of 1. Roll the expended dice and reduce the amount of damage from the attack equal to the total rolled. Flight, you gain a fly speed of 60 feet and you can hover. Spell Avoidance. When you are subjected to a spell or magical effect that allows you to make a saving throw to take only half damage, you instead take no damage if you succeed on the save and only half damage if you fail. You can't use this benefit if you have the incapacitated condition. So, Burning Life Force is going to be occasionally useful if it keeps you from going down in combat, or it reduces the concentration saving throw, allowing you to maintain a spell, though it will reduce fewer hit points than those hit dice would restore on a short rest. This is going to be better for those adventuring days where you have one big battle, rather than a number of encounters separated by short rests, or emergencies. With Flight, Flight is good, though I'm just going to note that there are multiple Sorcerer subclasses that provided Flight 4 levels earlier, that could be used more often, and they had a longer duration. Spell Avoidance is very cool, I think. I kind of think Spell Avoidance might be the standout feature of these 3, because it's like Evasion, except it doesn't care if it's a dexterity saving throw. So it could work on spells like Synaptic Static or Cone of Cold. Evasion doesn't work on those things. What it won't work on is Dragon Breath or non-magical traps, but I would still expect this to help you avoid more damage than Evasion. Well, the effect is active at least. Remember, Evasion is on all the time. This is going to be 1 minute. Strangely, when I looked at other Sorcerer subclasses, their 18th level feature tended to be weaker than their 14th level feature. But I don't necessarily think that's the case here. I think this might be stronger than their 14th level feature. And that means this feature would be a top tier feature compared to the Player's Handbook subclasses. So Spellfire Sorcerer might actually have the best 18th level feature, though I don't think they have the best at any other level. But overall, I think this is a really good subclass. I appreciate how no feature feels underwhelming here. They're all at least decent. And to me, that is good design. Jeremy from Insight Check pointed out that the features here are not requiring you to expend extra resources you weren't expending anyways, because a lot of Sorcerer subclasses, they have features that require you to use sorcery points in order to use them. And I thought that was a good observation, so I thought I would mention it again, and I'm going to link his video up above where he goes over the entire subclass and his take on it. And I think that aspect of this subclass is really going to appeal to some players. What I don't quite understand is some of the hyperbole, I think, that I've seen online about this being super powerful. I don't think this subclass is super powerful. It's definitely good, but I don't think we're seeing a lot of power creep here, or not significant power creep at least. And that is my assessment of the Spellfire Sorcery Sorcerer, and in my final subclass video, we'll be going over the Blade Singer, so I hope you will join me for that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.